give a warm welcome to the hosts of
The Bride of
Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins, and welcome back to Bride of Alternate Ending. I am your host with the most. I'll let you guess what I'm talking about. I'm also here with your host with the second most, Tim Brayton. How you doing, Tim?
I feel really angry that you've just besmirched my size, but second is still pretty good. But yes, so as you can tell from our wonderful badinage, we're here to talk about one of cinema's most sophisticated comedies of recent vintage, the 2001 film Elvira's Haunted Hills. You know what her haunted hills are, Brennan?
Well, the hills of Carpathia, right?
Her bosoms, Brennan.
So these hills have eyes, if the eyes are nipples. So we're continuing this month of looking back and following up on films we previously covered. In 2022, we covered Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, the 1988 film. And we're covering, well, this isn't a sequel, it's just the other Elvira film.
Basically, yes.
Yeah, Elvira's Haunted Hills, hailing from the early 2000s, which just doesn't feel right.
It is so weird to me. Not that there are only two Elvira films, but that being that there are only two Elvira films, the second one of them came out in the 2000s. Like, if she'd been in, 15 films and they were still cranking them out as late as 2002, I'd be like, well, that's kind of sad, but I get it. But that it took 13 years for her to marshal her forces for a second feature, and it came out at a point in time when I would not have assumed that she had... I would have assumed that the early 2000s would have been a low ebb in her cultural cachet.
I mean, I think it was, is the thing. Shoot. So after we recorded our Elvira Mistress of the Dark episode, I did read her biography, which I highly recommend. It's really, really good, and she's a fantastic writer. It's called Yours Cruelly, Elvira. But she covers the making of this film, and I wish I could remember more of that chapter than I do. But obviously the first film was a pretty substantial flop. So it really was kind of a matter of regrouping and figuring out what Elvira is in the late 80s and 90s, and that's kind of... And this film was made on an absolute shoestring in, Bulgaria or whatever.
Right.
So I think it came out at the absolute earliest time they were able to put it out, and that happened to be the exact wrong time for an Elvira movie making fun of 1950s horror, probably.
Now. It is also making fun of early 1960s horror.
That is true. But it's this interesting melange of decades that are really potently not where either horror or comedy was in the early 2000s. And I don't think that is a flaw in the movie. It's just fascinating that it exists on the timeline in this way. It is... yeah.
It really, really is. It's so incongruous. If you think of the movies that came out. So this premiered at a film festival in the summer of 2001, but it hit general release in the United States on Halloween 2002. So just, roll around in your head that this movie came out the same calendar year as Spider-Man and The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers.
Yeah, and this is something I observed upon in my Letterboxd review, but this is a post 9/11 movie.
It is. And that's a weird... when you frame it that way, it's like this is how she wanted to help America heal, you know?
And I'm sure she helped so many gay kids
I
at
was going to
Blockbuster.
say, the gay Americans healed.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so what are we dealing with? Do you want to do the plot synopsis this time? Because you've seen this movie twice, and I've only seen it the once.
I did. I went right out and watched this after we saw Mistress of the Dark, because I thought Mistress of the Dark was just a fun old time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not a fun time.
Absolutely.
It's not anti-fun. But basically, we start in the middle of the 19th century, sometime around 1850 or so, and there is a rural inn where Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, played as always by Cassandra Peterson, is being... She's having unquiet dreams. She's having a nightmare of being walled in to a cavernous like basement, very very Poe style. Mm-hmm. And she wakes up screaming next to her buxom, and by buxom I mean like just sort of spherical shaped French maid, Zuzu, played by Mary Jo Smith. And they are then further woken up by the innkeeper, who is demanding the money that they owe them, and they manage to escape town without paying their inn bill because they have no money. And we discover at this point that Elvira and Zuzu are heading to Paris, where Elvira has some sort of cabaret or burlesque act lined up. But along the way, as they're traversing Europe, they are currently in Carpathia, and they are given a ride by a friendly but creepy coach. And this coach takes them to the castle Helsebus, where they basically get involved in the fall of the House of Usher.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, there's the creepy lord of the manor who has the sensitivity to sight and sound.
Yes, creepy lord of the manor, played by Richard O'Brien of Rocky Horror fame, no less.
Yeah, well, this is... I would say probably one of his top 5 most prominent roles, which probably isn't great for Richard O'Brien.
I mean, other than Rocky Horror and Shock Treatment, what would even possibly be the rest of the top 5?
He has a voice in the cartoon Phineas and Ferb.
Okay.
So that's a popular cartoon, or it was. So that's a solid. That is a top 4 right there.
Sure, but yes. So we have the creepy old lord. We have the ailing young woman who seems to be dying of some sort of indistinct consumptive plague. We have the untrustworthy doctor who seems to be conspiring with the lady of the house. We have a portrait of a woman who looks just exactly like Elvira herself, who is the late wife of the decaying creepy lord. We have a torture chamber in the basement. We got all the good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very House of Usher. We got a little bit of Rebecca sprinkled in there, like all the good things.
Yep. Some House of Usher, some Pit and the Pendulum. It's all good.
Oh yeah, we'll get to the Pit and the Pendulum. But yeah, so this is very much, a pastiche of that type of storytelling with this extremely broad, shticky 1980s character shoved in 2002. There is not a whiff of 2002 in this movie, and I think that is to its benefit.
No, I mean, this film would have already felt kind of... So this is a pretty explicit parody, not just of this kind of gothic storytelling. It's a parody of the Roger Corman Poe cycle. Mm-hmm. Like, that is the specific thing it is a parody of. If this had come out right on the heels of Mistress in the Dark, this comes out in 1989, let's say, it would have still felt sort of weird.
Yes.
To be like, wow, those movies came out a long time ago. I don't know what you're going on about. In 2002, that is just baffling. Like, by 2002, who other than genre specialists is still watching the Corman Poes?
I truly don't know. I certainly wasn't in 2002. But yeah, no. So it is baffling, but it's not only a satire of things that were incredibly retro to the point of just perplexion, but also it is this comedy style. It's very much born from the kind of, I mean, it feels a lot like the thing that Mel Brooks was doing in the 70s and 80s, but amped up with a more kind of burlesque, saucy, wink to it. Mm-hmm. This is very much the type of movie where you'll hear like that big bassy drum, like boom, while someone crosses their eyes or whatever, like as a reaction to something.
Exactly. That is not a theoretical example.
Exactly.
I don't believe.
I don't know if that exact thing happens, but it might as well. It's
Well,
lots
at
of
a
boings.
minimum, the boings are often in reference to Elvira's, assets.
Oh, does she have huge boobs? I didn't notice.
She perhaps has huge boobs that are being compressed and thrust forward by her dress, such that it feels like they are a bigger character than anyone other than possibly Richard O'Brien, and of course Elvira herself.
Oh, certainly. They certainly have the most business to do.
It is absolutely the case that the blocking and gag construction has started with what are her boobs going to smack into this time.
Mm-hmm.
As like the first decision usually being made by the director.
Absolutely, and there are multiple sequences where someone gets stuck between her boobs.
Yes, there are.
But anyway, I would venture a guess as to say this style of shticky comedy is much more up your alley than it is mine. That kind of broad slapstick material.
I mean, in general, I like slapstick. In general, I like shticky. I like the sort of borscht belt. Mm-hmm. We're gonna make the most obvious joke possible, and we're gonna try to sell it not by being witty, but just by really overperforming it. I mean, you do compare it to Mel Brooks. I do like Mel Brooks, although, it's worth reminding ourselves at this point in time, Mel Brooks is done. Like, there is no more Mel Brooks movies after the late 90s.
Well, no, it wouldn't be Elvira's Haunted Hills if it was doing something contemporary.
That's quite true. But also, like, where Mel Brooks had been most recently, I forget when exactly it came out, 4 years before this, I think. His most recent film had been Dracula, Dead and Loving It, which is itself sort of a parody of, like, mid-century Gothics that is earth-shatteringly terrible. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a certain level of, not only is this form of humor passé, this sort of humor is spent. Like, there's not a lot you can do with it anymore, and I think you kind of feel that in this movie.
Yeah.
So even though it is a kind of comedy I like more than you do, I am willing to say this is straining to make that kind of comedy work.
I think that's incredibly fair. I think that it insofar as it works at all, it is because of Elvira, which was the same thing as the last movie. She's such a compelling comic presence, and Cassandra Peterson performs her so well and so confidently that you kind of just want her to keep doing exactly what she wants to do, even if it does feel like this kind of tepid bath of comedy that didn't have a lot to offer.
Yeah, no, it is, I'd say even more so, because there are other elements in Mistress of the Dark that I think land. Mm-hmm. It is clearly the case that Haunted Hills is working or not working or whatever, in as much as it has any merits. They are coming entirely from Peterson's just like sort of fearlessness about looking like a weird idiot on camera.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's such a delight to see someone who is so willing to do that.
Yep. She commits to the bit. She's having a good time. She's leaning into these line deliveries of very, very, very obvious jokes. And there's energy to that, and I respond to that energy.
Yeah, and totally. Because, like, for me, I'm, as we have discussed, not as much a fan of the shtick. I am not a fan of Mel Brooks. But as with most subgenres of things that I'm not a huge fan of, like, let's say country music or this type of comedy, it's so much better when women do it. And it's so fun. And I think that Cassandra Peterson also gets to show off in a couple other ways outside of the Elvira thing that she does. Because I think Elvira was designed to show up in 45-second chunks in between the scenes of I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and I think that's where she belongs as opposed to the lead of a feature, probably. But there are moments, like there's when it actually turns specifically into the genre parody that it's doing more than the slapstick, I think she really shines, especially when she's playing I think Alora, that's the name of the first wife of Richard O'Brien's character. But especially when the ghost of Alora possesses Elvira, she's got this creepy gravity to her, where I was like, oh, that's a performance. Like that exactly fits the type of movie that would have been running in the 50s. It was really good.
Absolutely. And I think it is, it's worth keeping in mind, and we've already sort of muddied this just by the way we're talking about it. We are looking at Cassandra Peterson playing the character of Elvira, who is playing the character of Elvira, in a sense. Like, there's both the persona and the character in the movie, and neither one of them is Cassandra Peterson. So she is performing. Like, she's constantly turned on, and I think it would be very easy to assume this is just kind of like somebody leaning back on their shtick, which it is, but also, like, she is a good actress, and this is something I think it's very easy to lose track of because the character is such a broad, weird stereotype. But, like, as you say, she's built for a certain thing, and she's very good at it, right? Like those 45-second chunks. Cassandra Peterson has really good comic timing. She has really, really good screen presence. And something that I have seen in between my two viewings of Elvira's Haunted Hills, even though they were only separated by, 6 months, was the Rob Zombie Monsters.
Oh, uh-huh.
And she is in it. And it's the first time I've seen her playing not Elvira. And
How was that?
Quite good. Quite good. It actually really... I mean, it's still a kind of, like, big, goofy cartoon parody of, like, mid-century suburban mores. But, it really, I think, made me kind of reappreciate that she does have really good comic timing. She does have good instincts as an actor. She's maybe not great at character creation. She's better at this kind of very, like, loose comedy, which makes sense given her background. She's a stage-trained comic. I think she was a member of the Groundlings specifically. And so, I mean, that movie, weirdly, is what I kept thinking of here, because it was like, she does have the goods as an actor. Like, she's not ever going to be called upon to, play Lady Macbeth, but she knows what she's doing. She's not just coming out there and, like, mugging.
Yeah, exactly. And not everyone needs to play that character to be Shakespearean. Like, the people who are... There's so many different ways you can excel at performance or capturing an audience. But yeah, no, Cassandra Peterson is really, really terrific, and it is just fun to see her have fun. And what you were saying about her playing Elvira, I think is totally right. Because Elvira's Haunted Hills is it's so weird just at the concept level of throwing her into a period piece in Carpathia, but still being modern Elvira.
Right.
It very much feels to me like any of the Muppet movies, but especially like A Muppet Christmas Carol or Muppet Treasure Island.
Sure.
Where you know that Kermit is playing Bob Cratchit, but you also that Bob Cratchit is a character in this story, but you also know that Kermit is a character who is playing Bob Cratchit. But then that's where... Sorry, what?
And also you know that Kermit is Steve Whitmire's hand in a felt bag.
Well, but here's... Like, you know that as an audience member, but there is a brick wall there as far as what the movie acknowledges.
Correct. Yes.
Because within the confines of the movie, Kermit is the actor and he is playing a character, but you're aware of both things at the same time. And that's the thing here. Elvira is playing this role in this Poe movie, but she is also Elvira. And it's this, kind of fun, mind-bending game.
And also, part of the reason why I landed on that, and at some point I want to talk about this, so why not now? It is a different energy that Elvira is giving us than in the first movie, and I think not as appealing an energy. And I think this gets to why it is... We've both made it pretty clear, I think, what our position is. This is clearly not as good a film as Mistress of the Dark. Like,
no.
It's obviously not.
It wasn't necessarily this film's destiny to be worse than that film, because that film certainly had its ups and downs. But it is worse, but not to a huge degree.
No, and I would say not maybe it's destiny, but it's hard to imagine an Elvira film coming out in the 2000s being better than an Elvira film coming out in the 80s.
Well, yeah.
Like, it really, truly is. But the concept of the character or the writing or the performance, I'm not sure exactly what. There is... So she's doing the Groucho Marx thing that she did in the first movie, where basically every single thing she says is this sarcastic, deflating one-liner. But whereas in the first film, I kind of got this sense that we were, like, on her side, and we were, like, listening to her making all of these jokes to kind of deflate these, like, weird, stuffy, conservative types. In this film... the quipping feels like almost sort of a knee-jerk reflex, like they don't know what else to do, so they're just going to be like, well, she's going to say something insincere and filthy, without it necessarily feeling like it's being driven by character in any way. They also generally feel more mean to me, and I'm wondering if you had the same sort of observation or feeling. I feel like there are many places in this film, compared to none, really, in Mistress of the Dark, where Elvira's being nasty, and it's not sympathetic, and I don't feel like I'm on her side. And this is particularly true of how she treats her French maid, Zuzu. Where, like, it almost feels like the joke is more on Elvira. That she's, like, such a weird, brittle egotist, that she's just kind of going to kind of nastily snark her way around and, like, insult people for no real yield. It's not like she's deflating anything. She's just kind of being cynical.
That's really interesting. Yeah, she's very callous in this movie because, like, I guess, I mean, you know, to bring up the Muppets again, like, they're kind of playing her as a Miss Piggy, like this kind of, like, overblown into herself performer who's not that good.
Right.
As opposed to this, you know, scrappy woman who knows better than these boring conservative small town folk and wants to do a big Las Vegas show. But yeah, no, she's definitely there is a callous quality. I don't know that I noticed that specifically, but it's certainly you're right. The character of Zuzu gets she's a very, you know, she's a stock character. But the joke is that, wow, a fat woman exists and Elvira's gonna be mean to her, and it's just like it's just not funny.
I think you are shortchanging that character. There are two jokes. There's also, she's French.
Yeah, I feel like they lean on that a lot less, though. I feel like that would have made more sense as in terms of what they were doing here.
It is both. They lean on it less than they lean on her being fat, and they lean on it at all, which felt strange to me. Again, for a comedy being made in 2002, like that's even like pre-60s. That would have felt like humor in like 30.
Yeah, and like, you know, sometimes when she moves around, they'll like play a tuba, and it's like, okay, really. And because, like, I mean, I certainly wouldn't have wanted them to lean into it more, but they almost. That's certainly the only really thing about Zuzu that I could point at, but it's also not leaned on that hard, so they kind of don't even commit. It's just kind of randomly cruel.
Well, and that's the thing, is like, this is to a degree that any of this kind of like shticky type of humor is based in character, which they're generally not really. This is extremely not based in character. Like, it puts a whole bunch of stock types for Elvira to sort of hammer into at top speed. So we have the kind of like sneering mustachioed doctor, we have the frail young woman, we have the sort of roly-poly maid, none of whom exist, really. They're just there to have reaction shots or to provide the butt of jokes. But it's very, very much designed as a just kind of machine to grind out quips for Elvira to say.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And also, another way that they kind of undermine her character, like, we had the discussion in the first film where Elvira is a character that's all about sex, and she's very horny, and you know she has sexual experience, but, like, the fact that she doesn't have sex on the screen in that movie makes sense with the way, the implications of burlesque and the thing that she's doing. But they also undermine that here because she does have sex with the hot, stable guy, and it doesn't give anything to the movie for that to have happened.
No, although I will say the hot stable guy, I like the joke about him. He is the one thing who I can't like fit into the sort of AIP Poe parody structure. Like he's coming from some other thing entirely. But he has been, for no obvious reason, very crudely and very obviously overdubbed. Mm-hmm. And that gag lands for me. They sort of just, we're not even going to comment on it. We're just going to have it be super obvious and let you be like, well, that's weird. Feels like it's parodying something in an effective way. I don't know if I could quite say what the thing is it's parodying.
I mean, it feels like it's parodying the Italian Giallo movies more than anything to me.
Right, which is a strange thing for this to be choosing to parody.
Yeah, yeah, it's really weird because that's like the closest I can get at least to like a handsome white man being dubbed, because you're getting dubbing jokes about like kung fu movies or Godzilla movies or whatever around this time even then. But yeah, it's random.
Well, because part of what's weird about it, the actor, so it's the on-screen actor is Gabriel Andromache, or Mash, I don't know what happened. It's Greek something. He is clearly speaking in English. So it's just that his voice has been replaced. I assume he had a substantial accent.
Yeah.
But even so, other characters in this film have substantial enough accents that shouldn't have been disqualifying. But I think it is for the joke. So we see him speaking more or less synced dialogue. It's just kind of floating above the soundtrack in a weird way. And his dubbing, by the way, was provided by Rob Paulsen, which I want to say just because Rob Paulsen's a great voice actor, and I believe in giving great voice actors their due, because they're having a tough time.
Yeah. Oh boy. But yeah, no, and I think that the stable boy, that joke is the arena where Elvira's Haunted Hills shines the best. Like I like it the most when it is doing just general kind of breaking the fourth wall comedy more than the like shticky parody that they're doing for most of it.
Right.
Like there's a part where Elvira addresses the camera and like warns it not to follow her as she gets out of the bath. And there's certain things like that where, or bragging about being able to afford this cool special effect at the end.
Right.
And that at least hits me in a place that I enjoy a little more.
The joke about the special effect is kind of weirdly maybe my favorite thing that happens in this movie. In part because she doesn't just like break the fourth wall. She says, we could afford such a groovy special effect.
Uh-huh.
And the specific word choice of groovy is just like, wow, this movie is not embarrassed of itself on any level. And for something that is so meta, it's weirdly unself-aware in a way that I find extremely charming.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because it's ultimately, like, while it's a bit thin, it is charming. And, again, because of her, that's what's going on. Because no one else here is really that interesting. And sadly, kind of not even Richard O'Brien, who is great.
He is clearly the second best in show. But it is a bad show.
Yeah. And they don't use him enough, and they don't ask him to be as over like they get him to a place of being this over the top parody character, but not quickly enough.
Agreed.
And also just his ultimate spoiler alert, that character dies. His ultimate demise is like really pointedly unbloody, which was kind of annoying to me. I
appreciate that the film just like races through killing off its entire ensemble at the end for no reason other than because it can, but it does feel like there aren't gags really as that's happening, and that seems weird to me, that like they're not making more of this kind of bloodbath of the cast.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's born of the budget also.
The budget, the rating.
Yeah, it's just you see a lot of because there is a Pit in the Pendulum set, and you see a lot of the pendulum slicing through him but doing nothing, and it's just like, why show it?
Right, exactly.
But also there is a Pit in the Pendulum scene where she's tied down in front of the pendulum, and the gag's going to be that her boobs are so high up that she can like press the rope into the pendulum and escape to safety.
Exactly.
But that's a really long sequence before she does that.
Uh-huh.
You see a lot of the stable boy pounding on the door trying to get in, and then the pendulum swinging, and I think that was born from, we poured all of our money into this set and we're going to show as much of it as we can rather than anything interesting going on in the film.
Yeah. Also, I think in general, and this is a good example of that, this has the problem that a ton of parodies have, so this is not a unique problem by any stretch of the imagination. It is unsure how seriously to take its plot and its stakes.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the final sequence, they just quickly kill off everybody and then launch into the last scene, which is a sort of, or is it the end gimmick that is just completely corny and stupid and makes no sense.
Yep.
When it's doing that, it's very clearly like, you're not here for the story. We're not even going to pretend you are. But then it lays out the plot so laboriously, and it makes sure that it walks through the developments so, like, it thinks we care about the story sometimes. And I'm pretty sure I cared about the story never.
No, and it's only intermittently interesting as a pastiche too.
Yeah.
Like there I think probably my favorite moment is when the kind of intense second wife of the master of the manor, she just is talking about how everyone in his life has cheated on him in some way. Mm-hmm. And she's like, your first wife, an adulteress, your brother, an adulterer, and she just keeps going, and I did enjoy that.
That's good. No, that's good.
But yeah, I mean, as far as the humor, like, where do you have any specific moments that are a favorite or least favorite that stand out?
Not
I can
necessarily.
give you another example if you think, yeah.
What were you gonna say?
Yeah, I was gonna say my least favorite is a joke where she's eating what she thinks is a stew, but turns out she's eating out of the master's chamber pot, and I'm like, that is a joke for kids. I don't care. That
is a cheap ass joke. That's another thing. This movie does not know who its targeted audience is. It is pitching a lot of its humor at children, and it is pitching a lot of its humor at very immature adults, and it does not know how to square that circle.
It's everything to no one, kind of.
Yes. No, that's a good candidate for worst joke. Although even there, Cassandra Peterson gives us such a priceless reaction shot that, like, she's working it. Like, that's the thing. None of the jokes are terribly good, but I can't truthfully say that any of them fall flat because she's always committed to the bit, and even when the bit is not working, like, you don't see the flop sweat. She's gonna pound through it as hard as she can. I mean, I do really like the dubbing gag, which is an ongoing joke, not a specific joke, but I do think it works for me pretty well. So I think I would have to go with that as my pick for Best in Show. I want my pick for Best in Show to be a boob joke, if only because there's so many of them, and I would like to pick something more representative. But it's all kind of the same joke, is the thing.
Yeah, well, there's a very good wordplay boob joke early on where the doctor has seen Elvira's posters, and he's like, it's a very titillating image. And she says, oh, well, then it must be a good likeness. So that's good. And my favorite joke is probably a more subtle one. It's the doctor is talking about what he did at work that day and helping out a patient with the bubonic plague. And while he's doing this, he is touching every single roll in the breadbasket and putting it back down while he decides which one he wants.
That was really good. That's really good.
Yeah, I like that one. It's the one that's calling the least attention to itself, I think.
Which is true, because there's not a whole lot of humor in this film that is not calling maximum attention to itself.
Yeah, exactly.
I was curious. I think it is natural that it would be neither someone's favorite nor least favorite part of this movie, but I'm curious what you thought of the musical number. So there comes a point where, to like demonstrate what she does, Elvira launches into this big burlesque routine singing a song called, I believe, Life is Like a Music Hall.
Music, yeah.
And it is, as you would expect, basically she's telling the story of a young woman who walked into a music hall a virgin and walked out of the music hall having experienced so much of what life has to offer, full of these... They're double entendres in the most literal sense, but it's really hard to say that there's not just the one entendre for a lot of these jokes. So it's a super, super body word play with, things like, I met the jugglers, they helped me juggle their balls and things like that. That's not the actual line, but it's an actual joke. And I have thoughts on how that whole thing is working, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, well, I mean, it's certainly... It's just kind of like, it's basically an intermission for the movie. And I like seeing Cassandra Peterson do burlesque, so I had a nice time, but it really kind of doesn't service the movie particularly well. Yeah,
it's fit into the movie weird, which is fine, because this is a movie that doesn't really care about pacing or structure. I get that the movie is low budget. I wish they had been able to go for a little bit more gusto. It feels sort of short. It also feels it's blocked in a very weird way. Like it's being staged to the camera, in that she's turned away from every other actor on screen, but it is very often not. It's staged for the audience in a proscenium stage, but the camera's not always occupying that space. So it's like sometimes she's like staring off to like camera left, and we're just kind of at some random angle. It's like it's very confusing what exactly we're meant to be looking at. So it doesn't feel like a performance to us. It just kind of feels like a performance in this kind of empty space. And I think it could be more energetic than it is. And I think that the director, Sam Irvin, is just not good maybe at filming a musical number. So I wish it would better, because I do like the idea of it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. At that point in the movie, I was so used to its kind of scattershot approach of just throwing everything in every direction, like both in the comedy and just aesthetically, that I was kind of like, it kind of washed off my back, those aesthetic flaws. But yeah, no, it definitely could be better, but most of the movie could be. That's
very true. Also, while I was talking about it, I suddenly remembered another sequence that I really liked that is doing something that the comedy in this film is not typically doing, and I think sort of stands out for that reason. We are getting the flashback narrated story of how Lord Helsebus's first wife ailed and died. And while we are hearing the story, we see Richard O'Brien doing like all of this goofy nonsense trying to make his wife like happy. At one point he does the like fake I'm going down the stairs routine in front of her bed. And it is, to me, the moment where Richard O'Brien is actually getting to like do something in the entire film, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely cute and charming. And I think, okay, I don't want to tell tales out of school. I might be misremembering this, so I'll be as general as possible. But I do think there was some friction between O'Brien and Cassandra Peterson on set, so that might explain some of the kind of weird lack of O'Briening there is here. But yeah, no, it's just it's nice to see him just open up the throttle a little bit.
It is. I like it because it is the one just kind of playful and silly beat in the film, whereas the rest is trying very hard to be kind of like slapsticky and or bawdy. And that's just cute. It's the only cute humor in the movie, I think.
Yeah, that is true, because yeah, Elvira's Haunted Hills is not a cute movie.
No, it's, again, bawdy is certainly the word for it, I think.
Well, yep.
Go ahead.
No, you go, sorry.
I don't really know that I had anything specific to say.
Okay, great. Well, I was going to say, I think, I was, when I was watching the movie, I wasn't sure we'd be able to talk for more than 20 minutes about it, because it is a very thin concept. But we sure did talk a lot about it, so I think we can approach wrapping up. But if you did have anything else you wanted to add, I feel like I'm covered.
I mean, I'm a little disappointed that we made such a tiny number of boob jokes, and if I could go back and do like a special edition of this podcast where I just found ways of talking about them, I probably would. But on the other hand, what boob jokes were left for us that the movie did not already make?
Yeah, exactly. We're really tapped out. They're really front and center.
Mm-hmm.
If you know what I mean.
I appreciate the effort.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you had to grade me on my performance on that joke, would you give me a double D?
Hey, that's better.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, because that's the thing. It's only boob jokes. So yeah, she did our job for us, really.
Exactly.
As far as like, if you were listening and you haven't seen Elvira's Haunted Hills, if it sounds like the type of thing you'd enjoy, you'd probably enjoy it. It's the exact thing that it's doing. It is not great, but it is breezy, and it's a 90 minutes that'll go down so easy. It's
definitely coming from a place of unabashed enthusiasm for what it is. It clearly loves the Vincent Price Poe films. I think it I don't remember it name drops anyone specifically, but like it's coming from a real honest place. And as someone who does like those AIP, those Corman Poe movies, I'm tickled to see someone else likes them as much as I do, even in 2001.
Yeah. As a horror comedy that came out between American Pie and Saw, it is really so committed to itself that it ignores everything that's going on around it.
It sure does.
But yeah, I think that's gonna do it.
I think so.
But yeah, anyway, so we are now done with this month of looking back on 2022. We can now go forward into 2023 in some way, because I guess what we're doing next month is a little bit of a roundup as well. We're gonna do our other second annual celebration. At the time that we're recording, the Oscar nominations have not been announced yet, but by the time this episode comes out, they will have, so hopefully the Patreon poll will be up. But we're going to be digging out the skeletons from the closets of people who are nominated for the Oscars this year. So horror films, either starring or directed by people who are nominated in the those big five categories, acting and directing and what have you. And I'm always excited to do that.
Absolutely, it'll be a good time. It's always fun to see the embarrassing or potentially even good things that people made early in their careers. So.
Yeah, you never know. Sometimes they're good. But yeah, The Messengers was not.
It sure was not.
But until then, thank you so much for listening. You can find more of my reviews and Tim's and podcasts and everything you've ever wanted at alternateending.com. And yeah, I don't know. Have a great day. Bye.
Boobs ahoy, everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
She ate me.